Hello, I'm here with Robert James, the filmmaker behind the amazing Mrs. Vera's Daybook, which is a fabulous documentary that is now streaming as part of Out on Film's 35th year here in Atlanta. Um, Very excited to have the filmmaker here to talk with us. How are you doing today, by the way?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking me.
Of course, of course. So my first question would be, where did the idea initially come from? I do know that you did a short on Vera earlier, uh, about 2 years ago, and you did Ruminations about another San Francisco-based troupe. Where did this idea come to document Vera?
Well, actually, it came from Ruminations. Ruminations is about one of the co-founders of the Cockettes back in the late 1960s, Rumi Misabu. I made a film about Rumi, and one of his people contacted me and said, "Have you met Mrs. Vera? And you should." And I thought to myself, "Ooh, do I want to make another drag film? I'm not sure about that." But I went and met David and Michael. Actually, I met Michael Johnstone first, Mr. Tina, in the
Mhm.
film. And I was just about to take off on a vacation, and I met Michael, and we talked for about 4 hours. He and David's apartments, they're in the film, are adorned with every bit of pop culture and glitter and glam that you could imagine. I was just like swept away. And I realized that this wasn't your average drag. This was kind of a science fiction style drag that had many different faces, and that there was an entire performance troupe that marched in Pride every year that followed Michael and David. And so I immediately was interested. I wasn't able to start shooting a film because I had to leave town, and Pride was coming up, and I thought, well, I've got to catch this group in Pride. So I sent my crew while I was out of town, and I'm like, go to the parade, shoot this Vera sphere. And that set us off on our journey. And what we did was we made a short film, and it was just about Vera Sphere, the troupe. And as we were shooting and as we were filming, the plan was to make a short film about Vera Sphere. But we realized we had a bigger story. Michael and David were involved in historic activism. They were just very compelling figures in themselves. And so when I brought up to my crew, who has struggled with me over years to make films, and I said, I think I want to make a feature. And they're like, "Oh no, that's going to take so long." And I said, "Okay, we'll make the short, and then we'll make a separate feature." So what's great about our short, which is called Vera Sphere, a Love Story in Costume,
Mhm.
is that none of that footage is in our feature film. Zero. We made a whole brand new film, including the Vera Sphere. And I kind of love that we have two standalone pieces. What happened in the middle was COVID, and we weren't able to finish the unabridged Mrs. Vera's Daybook because of COVID, and our ending was going to be David painting that mural. Well, that got interrupted by COVID, so our film stopped. And so we created a 56-minute version for PBS to show for free in Pride Month during COVID. And we were glad about that. They give their art away for free, so we were so glad that we could offer something during the pandemic when everybody was stuck inside in Pride Month that reminded them what Pride is all about.
Mhm. I love that so much. When I first started watching the movie, the first thing I said was like, Vera is a piece of art. Like Mrs. Vera is a piece of art. And as the story went on, I was like, oh, of course, they're two amazing artists, and they both come from so like very different backgrounds growing up. And I really appreciated that Michael sort of took their darkness and David took their light and created something amazing in the middle. Do you feel that this idea, this balance of dark and light, do you think that that's an inherent part of queer art as we've seen it throughout history and especially here with Mrs. Vera?
Well, that's a great That's a great observation and a great question. I think with the nature of our, you know, prior to the past 30 years, our hiding in the shadows just to get along in society brings about the darkness that will reflect in the art, whatever it is. You know, we've had famous characters all throughout history, whether it be, you know, Alexander the Great or Leonardo da Vinci or Oscar Wilde. You know, either it was innuendo about their story, or they had to bring a bitterness or a lightness that, you know, hid what was really going on. And Michael and David were not in the shadows, however, but I think you hit it perfectly when you said that they had very different stories. Michael came from kind of a dark upbringing with a mother who didn't want him, and David kind of also, he kind of had a unattending mother, and but the AIDS crisis is the catalyst there that was bringing them down. You know, I love how David says in the film, you know, he had his first boyfriend living in New York, and he says, you know, we were just busy doing whatever we were doing, even though we didn't really know what we were doing in this time of crisis, you know. And it was the ACT UP demonstrations, and he was involved in that, and Michael was caretaking, you know. And this film was an homage for me, and this is about the lightness and the darkness, because I was, you know, I wasn't present. I was living in Florida when the AIDS crisis was happening, and I was a bartender in gay bars, and I was ignoring it. You know, it was happening in San Francisco and New York, and I was young and I was partying. And, you know, the fact that these two men were right in the middle of the crisis, and what did they do to respond? They cared for other people. And, you know, I was not that queer man, you know. And so this is my way of giving back to a time that I wasn't present for.
I love that so much. And I also love the fact that while also they were like these amazing caregivers, and the whole story about caregiving just blew me away. And then when they displayed the quilt in the movie, it was just staggering, to be honest. But I do love the fact that they used their art to sort of bring about this beauty and lightness to a very, very dark situation. Um, Speaking to the fact that David, when he was becoming Vera, said, you know, I'd never done this before. I didn't really know what I was doing. I just kind of did it. With a lot of queer art, I do notice that it comes from a place of DIY. It comes from a place of not knowing what to do. You just sort of do it. Do you feel that that is inherent to the queer experience? And as like with that, were you always a documentarian? Did you set out in your life to document stories, tell stories, or did you just sort of like fall into this career path and this calling, sort of how Michael and David did?
I think that's a great observation about queer art, and my story does fit in with that also. And I think, you know, many of us in the queer community are not only attracted to the arts, but we start engaging in it. You know, I love how David in the film mentions, you know, there's really nothing to making these costumes. It's like making a Mother's Day card. You're just you know, a macaroni Mother's Day card. You're just putting things on top of each other. But I think as queer people, you know, we love, you know, award shows and, you know, and drama and excitement and, you know, high kicks and things like that. Maybe not all of us, but I think a lot of us do. And I know I was that one. I was running around, you know, as soon as my mom left the house, you know, I was putting on her Liza Minnelli Live at the Winter Garden Theater, you know, album. And I knew every word. And I eventually got to meet Liza, which was a great thing. Yes,
Love,
yes, she
love
was
Liza.
fabulous.
Love Liza.
Love me some Liza.
Yes.
Yeah, I could just go off on that. But, you know, so I think, yes, definitely we experienced that. My career path was, I actually moved to New York City to become an actor. And I went to one audition, and I saw the talent in the room, and I had been in a couple of plays, one in my community college, one in my high school. You know, I was not prepared for New York City. I was completely intimidated. I left the audition, never went to another one, but eventually I became a DJ. And that was my performance for a while. And I did that and created a business and moved to California and created another, you know, DJ world of my own. And then I met my husband, got a video camera. We traveled the world. And when the crisis of 2008 happened, the economic crisis, we didn't have a lot to do except try to hold on to what we had. And he said, why don't you go to City College in San Francisco and take some film classes? You're really good at this. And so that's what started my filmmaking career. And then I stalked a filmmaker that would let me be a, you know, who would mentor me. And I spent some time in LA and learned how to make films that way. So
That's awesome.
yeah, the creative journey has always been there for me. I, you know, at all the movie magazines, all the, you know, the Rolling Stone magazines, I was a big follower of the arts, always live theater, all those things.
Love that.
I'm
love
still that way.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm so glad that, you know, since COVID's over, we have a chance to get back to live theater, because for
Oh
so
yeah,
long, those years, we
yeah.
just, it wasn't there, sadly.
I know, it was horrifying.
It was so
Yeah, it's like,
sad.
will we ever be normal again?
Right, right. But we're back, we did it. Um, I want to know, do you plan on doing more stories involving the San Francisco queer art scene? Because you did Ruminations, you did the Vera Sphere, Mrs. Vera, and I know you said earlier, you know, when you did Vera, you didn't want to do another movie about a drag queen, but it seems like there's so much in, you know, the San Francisco scene, in this world that you've began documenting. Do you want to dive back in there? What's next?
Well, I'm already immersed in a project that I've actually been working on for about 10 years, and it is very much that way. It is about a revolutionary Methodist minister that created a progressive church. An African American preacher came in and transformed the Tenderloin area of San Francisco, and that same minister created a sex forum and then a postgraduate sex institute that was open in San Francisco for 40 years. He changed history with a famous dance raid in 1964, where all the queer people got, you know, got arrested for having a dance. And this happened 4 years before Stonewall. So I'm kind of bringing the history back for San Francisco. And this minister, like, freed hundreds of thousands of people with education and with activism. And that's my next story. And it's looking to be a 3-part miniseries called The Night Minister. And it's full of art. He had the biggest collection of erotic folk art in the world, films and posters and paintings and artwork and DVDs and magazines. And it was quite the sex institute. And it wasn't just queer sex, but there was a big emphasis, and there were a lot of queer students. A lot of infamous people went to this institute.
I love that. That's so
Yeah.
nice. I love it. I- Speaking about San Francisco as a city, as a space, for like all these years, New York has always been like a character in movies. The South has always been a character in movies. Do you feel that San Francisco is its own character? You've done this, your next project's going to be your, well, I guess including the short, like the 4th project in San Francisco. Like, is that a character to you? Do you feel that there's something about that space that calls to you?
Absolutely. My first film I made in Oregon that was about cremated remains from a mental institute called Library of Dust. It's on Prime.
Interesting.
So yeah, and then I decided I wanted to work around home, and you know, the Bay Area certainly has So many amazing stories. I found so many stories. I had a woman that was the first nude stunt woman as a short film. And that didn't work out. But I mean, there's so many crazy stories around San Francisco. And absolutely, with its history, I mean, just in my mini series, we're going to also be covering, Harvey Milk, the Reverend Jim Jones. Those are all San Francisco stories. People, if you really get into the history, and we're not that many people, it's only a 7 by 7 mile city.
Mhm.
And, compared to a New York or a Chicago or a Los Angeles or an Atlanta, we're a small city, but, it's a volatile place. It's an intense place full of activism, free thought, and it's been that way, kind of always. I think being a port city had a lot to do with it. It was
Mhm.
full of brothels and gambling and, opium dens and everything else in the turn of last century. And, it's always stayed progressive. So yes, San Francisco is definitely a character. It's shocking. I had a friend one time that moved out here before I did from Florida. And I remember him like, this is how long ago, he got on a payphone and he said, I just had to tell you, honey, there were 25, or no, there were like 60 clowns that just went by in a parade on tricycles. And I'm like, I got to go there,
That's
And
amazing.
shortly after that, I moved out here myself. And yes, San Francisco is, it's an enigma. It's a phenomenon. The creative nature of the people that live here, and the active spirit and the all inclusiveness, is just going to spring forth, some amazing, beautiful art and historical events happen here all the time. It's pretty amazing. I love living in the Bay Area. And I also have another project about a gentleman that was in a cult for 20 years, a queer gentleman. So there's another Bay Area story, and it was COVID that got him out of the cult. And he's actually enrolled in a master's program at UC Berkeley in psychotherapy to help people who are leaving cults.
Wow. That sounds
Yeah,
so interesting.
it's so Bay Area,
Whoa. Right. Cults
Yeah.
everywhere. Oh man, I love that. So my last question, I know it's getting close to 1:30. Uh, the Vera Sphere is this safe space. It's this space where people that didn't really know they had this sort of like flower in them to come and let it out, to walk outside of their boundaries. As we progress in the world and as, all these other spaces become more inclusive, I know the answer to this and how I feel, but do you feel like as we move forward, we are going to have a need for these queer spaces when we as a people, when we as a group can go around and queer the world wherever we go?
Absolutely, we do, because we're queering everybody. We're allowing everyone, because the Vera Sphere it's a lot of, you know, um, it's a lot of straight couples. It's a lot of people that don't identify as queer, but you'll hear them all after the parade say, I was queer today, and that giving people permission to find their inner, creative, their inner feminine, dramatic, whatever it is that they long to be, perhaps, but they don't get an opportunity. I just hope this film gets shown, in South Dakota, because if
Yes.
there's somebody that just
Yes.
wants to, make something, that wants to craft, some, cowboy out there that just sees some sequence and gets all excited. It's like, there is a place for you. Come to San Francisco. We will outfit you. We will put you in the parade, and honey, you can shine. Absolutely.
Yes. I love it. Thank you so much, so much. I really love the film. I hope everyone gets a chance to see it at this year's festival because it's amazing and it is incredibly inspiring. I know after I watched it, I was like, let me, go in my closet and see what I can tape together. I have no idea what I'm doing with sewing, but you know, make it a little fabulous. It was so
That's
great.
that's what a glue gun is for. I just
That
screened
there we
in
go.
Palm Springs, and some gentleman stood up and said, "Honey, I need to go break my glue gun out after watching our film."
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And again, the film is the unabridged uh, Mrs. Vera's Daybook, and it is streaming at this year's Out on Film Festival. And I just talked with the amazing and fabulous Robert James, the filmmaker behind it. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye.